Well, everyone, thank you. Isn't it great to be back at a conference?
Yeah.
Who's first time back at a conference is this? Have you guys been to this conference before? This is one of my favorites, by the way. I present a lot of conferences, but there's a few people here who do, but this is by far and away one of my favorites. It's just a great community. So I'm happy to see Phil. Congratulations to Phil, Tariq, and all the guys getting this going, because guys, this has been outstanding work getting this back. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit more about automation requirements and on how I'm talking about even through API or UI automation, but it's really getting started with automations. Like, it's not just a bare bones, how do you even get going with it, but the requirements for what our automation engineers need to get started with. So I'm going to do a little bit of historical trends and analysis, and I'll probably be dating myself, so don't mind me if I date on some of the tools and where the industry has gone. Some of the impacts from delivery and the constant evolution we're going through. Benefits from automation recordings, and we're going to go through that much more in depth. Future predictions for this industry, and then a session recap. So the market itself, historical trends and industry analysis. For those who have been around automation for a while, we're going to take you for a little journey. The first record and playback tools, right? We heard about these tools, record and playback. But one thing we know about it, it didn't work, right? Mercury had its tool, Rational had its tool, Empirics. There's some tools, and like, yeah, just record it and just play it back. That didn't work. So it was to test desktop applications. If you guys remember, just taking you through a journey, it was just really about desktop applications. It wasn't even about web. It was like, hey, we can get into look at some web elements, but now to show you where the whole tooling industry has gone, it has just been fascinating. Does anyone use any test automation market tools, commercial tools, as opposed to open source? Okay, just one person? Okay, a couple people. It just, the industry has really gone through a major transformation. So the tester was required to have scripting or programming knowledge, right? And so we had the tester, yeah, just learn how to do this scripting, but that wasn't in a tester's skill set, right? They were functional testers. They knew how to test the application through and through, but they're not programmers. They're not testers, or they're not, scripters. So here's some of the frameworks that I've saw from an evolution perspective. You had record and playback. Then you had structured testing where you, hey, just put in a couple conditions to make this record and playback work. Well, then we finally said record and playback's not working. Everyone just went right into the tool itself and just started coding. Then they started saying, wait a minute, well, why don't we separate our data out from our logic? Now, why don't we make these keyword things happen? Now we're going to do a little bit more model-based, and finally, a little bit more API testing. But everything, you could see where it went from record and playback, really targeting the manual tester. Then finally, it went back around. Everything is trying to get the manual tester continually involved. And how do they contribute to automation? And it's not saying that they're the ones that are creating the automation or maintaining it, but how do we get more manual testers involved? So quick show of hands, does everyone have a segregation of SDETs with manual testers? For the most part? Does anyone even have functional manual testers anymore? All right. And are they doing any automation? Okay. So this is one of my guys that I've talked with quite a bit. What automation engineers struggle with, and if those who know follow the work of Joe Colantonio, he had a couple of things on his site that he cited. He's saying that test script maintenance will get easier. I liked hearing that because you see on some of the vendors, you're going to see some of this. It's constantly trying to get that going. Even anyone who's using a Playwright, Cypress, Selenium framework, they're trying to get this much more like, how do I make it more easy? Automation tools, self-healing will arrive. Well, it's already here. A lot of tools have these self-healing kind of techniques. That's more on the UI level. But again, if it can't find an object this way, now I'm going to try with this method. Now I'm going to try it from an OCR perspective. Now I'm going to try it from an accessibility perspective. AI will help report automated test runs and analysis. definitely. And I have one of the gentlemen here who's one of the leaders in the AI field here. So he can probably attest to that. Non-Selenium tools, automation-based tools will gain in popularity. How many people are using open source? A lot of people. How many have migrated away from Selenium and using like the Cypress and Playwright? It just is. What tools are you using?
I use Playwright.
You know what? It became, to me, it was like the first dig when Selenium came out. It was the first thing to say, let's migrate away from HP. Well, let's call it like it is. Let's migrate away from something like HP and let's see if it gained in any popularity. And it did. And Selenium took off like crazy. Record and playback will rise again. I think I put this in here because of what Joe said about that. And then finally, a new buzz phrase, because we all need more buzz phrases. Continuous something, right? Continuous testing. And this is one I thought was interesting. The mega consolidations are coming already here. So you're seeing solutions, the commercial space that have test automation tools, a defect tracking, a test management, maybe performance testing. So you're seeing these companies come under one umbrella. So some of the impacts. Does everyone have still a little bit of water? Is everyone doing kind of agile-ish? I don't want to say everyone still has some level. We feel like we're doing agile, right? We feel like we're doing DevOps, but it's like I brand it, but you still feel like this is waterfallish. I still am, even in my company today, we're still like, when a stakeholder wants to introduce something, like this kind of feels waterfallish. Do you guys have that feeling too on certain things? Like it's just, so I hate to put it in there. I hate to put it in any presentation. I just feel like I have to because it's just still there. But it's still, if you are doing something waterfallish, do you automate regression or are you automating new features? Okay, so if you're automating regression at any point, were the test cases written with automation in mind? The answer is no. I'd be shocked if anyone says that these manual test cases have been written with automation in mind. Yes, if anyone says that, I invite you to come up here and do this presentation with me. Automating the new features, when do you automate within the build? Agile. So we have different project teams. Necessarily, it depends if it's a UI or an API level automation. I don't tell teams that they have to go always to in-sprint automation. From a UI perspective, I'm like, you may be best served at an N-1, depending on how late the UI changes are coming in, depending on, I don't want to give in a 2-week sprint cycle. I don't want to say you got 1 day to automate. I'd rather have a more quality automation deliverable. Does everyone believe in just in-sprint automation? N-1 work for anyone? You guys do some N-1? And then finally, with this whole DevOps world, right? And then it's just everything at that base level of that unit test and really those API integration tests. It's still, how many people are doing API testing, API test automation versus UI testing? Half, majority? But how hard was that? How hard was it to get a tester to think about the API? They could know the application cold, right? They could know the thing solid, and they know what this function is, and they know what these parameters are. A customer information API that takes city, state, address, zip. You know all this, but it's just because it's wrapped in an API, it just was different for testers to do. So if you've gotten over that hump, that's great. But it's really the time it takes to execute UI tests. I'm not going to go through. I'm sure if people seen this pyramid before, say yes, so I can go through it. Yes, sorry, but it's just showing that shift. It's just continual to get faster. So change is always evolving, faster cycles. So we got to get this faster automation. It's not just doing automation, right? But how do we execute the automation faster? Because we have teams that say they're 70% automated. Great. But they're taking 2 days to execute their UI tests. How much have we really saved? You know, and how much, and when we get down to it. So now it's regression. We got to execute that cycle again for 2 days. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Or is that just me? I hope it's not just me. Does it sound familiar? Yes. But when you get the API level, you 10 minutes for a whole suite. Again, the whole thing, and how do we do that more? So one of the stakeholders that I work with told me, Jim, our goal is to release weekly. I said, that's fantastic. So now let's work backwards on how we can get to a release weekly. Instead of her doing these quarterly releases, she wanted to release weekly. I said, so to do that, the UI automation is not going to be too, it's going to be too heavy. We're going to have to do a little bit more API automation. And as such, you do accept some risk from an API automation compared to UI. So the test can break easy. So some of the UI challenges, screen locators change. We got a lot of UI automation in the audience? And how best do we recognize objects? How do we go about it? Really querying the DOM, CSS selectors? Yep. But isn't it wonderful if something changes, developers don't? Yeah, fantastic. Elements are removed, just straight up removed. Because, you know, there's different ways. If the element is still on the screen, on that given screen, right? If some attribute changes, a lot of tools have the logic to be able to say, I can go find something that was semblance of that. I've got some AI, I've got some remembering of some attributes of there. But if you just flat up take it out and move it somewhere else, it's like, who knows? Structure changes, XPath structure changes are always fun. Dynamic attributes, those are fun. So one time I was working for a test automation product company and went to go see a customer. And I said, hey, you know what? I need something to anchor. If you want to do, you want to do pure UI automation, I need something to anchor onto. He's like, nope, everything's got to be dynamic. So I took my pencil up. I said, then I can't help you. He's like, you're trying to sell to me? I'm like, I can't help you. If you can't make anything, a single thing, I'm like, class ID, something where a developer doesn't even have to touch. I said, and we'll go get some entry-level developers who can do this for us. Didn't want to do it. So guess what? Didn't change. And really from the API level, it's the schema changes. So yes, I've been places before where the API level changed, the schema has changed. So basically they'll say, this is no longer an int, it's a varchar, and they change it. And our API tests, I'm like, it's API testing. How is this breaking all over the place? I couldn't imagine that. Technology stacks as well. All these wonderful things. So there was one project we were working on that was a Microsoft shop. And they said, hey, we're thinking about going to Angular. What's going to happen to our automation? It's going to have to be all remapped. Like everything, like majorly. I said, yes, because Java, JavaScript, Microsoft has, there could be different ways of rendering those objects. So yes, I can't say for sure, but I would plan for a full thing. So now I want to dive in a little bit more from those automation recordings. And guys, please stop me along the way if there's any questions. Keyword generation for testers. Better UI and API automation at the onset. Automation engineers starting off with good code. All testing rules, creating automation, then finally working with manual regression tests. So how many SDETs do I have in the room? So I'll ask you in the back, sir, do you take manual tests as your requirement and automate those for the most part? Yeah. We all do, right? You take those manual tests and how frustrated do you get and how long does it take you to traverse through? It's crazy. So let me talk about the keyword for a minute for testers. So screen 1, 2, 3, 4, just some controls. You got some edit boxes, radio buttons, check boxes. But the test script, what we're doing more is having manual testers record the basics. Not playback, record. So they're using tools to record the tests. So this is, if I'm the functional tester, I'm giving to you, this is the flow. You don't have to check that. What I need you to do as an automation engineer is go harden this. So just because it could be a dynamic element, but you've recorded, now instead of me creating as an automation engineer, these 5 tests, you as the functional tester have created 10 tests. They're not ready to go. I've got to go in there, prime them. I've got to go in there, really kind of make some edits to make sure they're ready to go. But other than that, now, and I'm one functional person, and I gave you 10 tests that you would have created 5 because you were trying to understand the logic. I already got the logic. I can tell you how it works. Now take me plus 3 other people. The throughput could be outstanding. So from a keyword-driven approach, does anyone maintain like a keyword-driven framework for their automation? If not, that's all right. I mean, it's a little bit more, everyone's trying to get to this keyword, but you have these different things like the select, check. So from a recording, now if I'm an automation engineer, I can maintain in my library, I've got 4 keywords that are created. And these scripts read as manual tests. So 2, better UI and API at the onset. So that script we were talking about, that script 1, here's the set of keywords that we had. We're separating that, and I'm not showing the tool, but everything, that's a best practice in automation, right? We separate our logic from our object repository. Just like we've always asked developers not to hard code data. One thing we absolutely always got to do as automation engineers is always maintain our object repository separate. So we can take that and we may make that object change to whatever it needs to be. It persists to all the scripts that call it. I'm sure everyone's following that for the most part. If not, please do, like now. So on that screen, the UI level and various and API level, there are some tools now out there. I'm not here marketing any tools. I don't work for a tools company. But there are tools now that actually have the ability to record your UI traffic. You put a recorder in front of it, it records the UI traffic. And what it gives you back is the APIs that were called. That's some next level stuff that we're trying to implement more. So think about that. If I want to get to an API level test, now I've got to talk to you as a developer. So what APIs? I'm testing screens 1 through 10 in this flow. Can you tell me all the APIs? And it's just it's going to take you a little bit to get through. But if I can do that, if I can record against that and get all the APIs that were tested, and now I build my own API test. So instead of that conversation, I'm asking the developer, what are all the APIs I got to test? I already have them. I just did a click record. I did a record all the way through. I'm asking you, hey, when I'm testing this API, can you tell me about these parameters? That's an easier conversation. You quickly look up that API. We could go through those parameters, done. And now I could do that a lot easier. So it helps developers understand what you want to use and validate. In turn, they can provide the detail level of APIs. So again, just a recording. So again, I'm not saying that the playback option is there right now, but the recording helps speed up this test script creation from an API or UI level. Better code base to start. By recording tests here, so I went through, has anyone ever used recordings before, like a UI automation tool, done recordings? And what do you get? You get that base level, whatever it may be. It could be JavaScript, .NET, whatever, but you C#, you can get that base level code. So chances are you see it, there's usually like a table editor that say, here's the manual steps, code editor, here's all the code that's generated in the background. Very slick. So now I don't have to go in and write all this code as an estet to start. I may go in to say, hey, here's this. I want to add a little condition loop statement in here. I want to add in a little class here to call this, but I don't have to write all this code from start. So again, it's recorded and then generated. So with this, there's no ambiguity on this desired step on what you want to validate. So you don't have to ask me, what did I mean to test? Oh, I'm sorry, you took my manual test. I haven't updated that in like a year. I don't even know if it's even valid anymore. Cleaner code to start, especially for newer engineers. And finally, if there's additional steps needed, we're just adding in a step. The code is, for the most part, a base level code is already there, generated. Automation for all. So we have people like product owners, test leads, business analysts, functional, automation testers, acceptance testers. Why can't they do recordings? This is what we're doing. We've just did a big project for our UAT team where we've automated all of their regression, everything that they want to do for their acceptance tests. And they've done some recordings. So it doesn't conflict with what the QA department does, but it just, this is how they want to execute on this. And we edited the code as needed. But again, why couldn't a business analyst, this is where we're pushing more. We've gotten more, the acceptance testers, we're pushing that more into the business analysts now. Help record some base level things, base level requirements. It's not means that I'm going to execute this test as soon as you record it, but that means it's a requirement for me. I see now what you're going to do. I'm going to harden it. I can make that a test. So levels, senior, intermediate, novice, it really opens it up to all. Maintain better regression. I think we can agree that functional tests were not written with automation in mind, and that's okay. And when I was doing manual testing, I never wrote it with automation in mind. So a whole different world, right? What about it if there's any access to test management repository, test environment? If I'm going in now, I don't have the right ID, I need this. Executing manual tests is I'm now executing these manual tests 3-4 times, maybe just to learn it so I can automate it. Because what I don't want my SDETs to do, I don't want them to really learn the application well, because I use them across so many applications that I want them for their core skill set of coding, being able to script, and being able to provide a really true kick butt test. So execution errors, what if I get this execution error? How many times do we see that? Oh yeah, I forgot, you got to do this. You got to click on that mode. You got to log in with this user ID. And we're just going back and forth. It's time invested in learning the manual test case, navigation at the right path. So forget all that. As long as if I get my recording from a functional tester, I'm good. I'm good. I know that I'm not questioning the flow of the logic. I'm now trying to really execute that test. So some predictions with that. Some industry predictions. I saw this, codeless automated testing. Okay. We've been talking about that for so long. How many people believe that automation can truly be codeless? I didn't think so. Not up here. I would ask someone if they'd said codeless, automation could be codeless. I'd ask them to come up here, please, and take a hand. Because I haven't seen it. I haven't seen the true codeless work. But there's a lot, but you've seen, how many mailings do you get? How much marketing material do you get from tools? Codeless automation. No, this one is truly codeless. This one will really work. All the time. And I believe they're getting better. They really are. They're getting close. It's not there though. And I don't know if we ever want it to be there. So some tools you have the ability to do a little scripting with, I don't know, behind the scene, very little scripting, but not like a full IDE. And it's just like, but I need a little bit more access to that. Invest more in automation, develop automation pipelines. That I think is going to constantly be a bigger thing. Pipelines, I know we're using it now, but the release, build, and all these environment pipelines are going to be blowing up. The blend of continuous testing, API and service test automation, much more AI ML, and chatbot tests. This is all I thought is interesting. Automating the automators. Does anyone do that today? Like something like a Blue Prism, UiPath, and just those. So Gaurav was one. I saw this. I'm like, this was interesting. These were my own personal things, though, for future predictions and automation. I think the AI capabilities are becoming more stabilized and normalized. So hopefully Tariq will have that done by the end of this conference. He'll personally get that going. And I see Jason in the back there too. Hopefully both these guys together will be, you know, you'll have it done by the end of the conference. You guys heard it here first. All right, see? But there's a lot more rigor putting into it, and I love it. Data security are becoming more prevalent with testing tools. How many people integrate a TDM tool into their automation? Does anyone? Does anyone use a TDM tool? So for those test data management, something, I don't know, Informix, yeah, Delphix, things like that. Yeah, yep. So data security is going to be much more prevalent on that. I think unit testing frameworks are going to integrate much more into test automation tools. That's just my thing. I could be wrong, but I think that the emphasis we put on that pyramid, so the JUnits and the such, are going to integrate much more into the tooling space to see more of a holistic picture. I don't know how. I just think I think it's going that way. Analysis is becoming more common with tools for functional coverage and code coverage. So does anyone use any code coverage techniques, methods, tools? And how do you do it? Functional coverage, line coverage? Branch code, yeah. And are you doing that within your tool itself? Okay. Thank you. Who else is doing that? What are you doing, sir?
UI coverage.
Okay. Are you using a tool for that?
Yes.
Okay. We're not marketing the tool, but I'm just saying, right. But it's good to know about some of these things. Yeah, which will you? Performance indicators within test automation solutions help performance tests. This is one thing we're starting to do, is to say, I'm not saying that we're going to be doing performance testing with our scripts. But if this API took 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 30 seconds, I'm knocking on the door for our performance director and saying, hey, by the way, this took 30 seconds to run. We'll get some indicators on a report. You may want to put a performance test on it. That's it. Just more like some leading indicators. If it exceeds a certain threshold, that you may want to go, there's some smoke over here. You want to check if there's a fire. Professionals, is anyone doing or working with their RPA groups? Like the robotic process automation? So basically the business professionals that are automating now and believe that they're automation professionals. Another conversation for another day. But it is one of those where RPA tools are becoming more, the RPA process is becoming much more visible in the marketplace. And you're seeing tools. I just love seeing how tools market themselves. I'm into some of that. So tools are now saying test automation. Oh yeah, we also do RPA, and we also, I'm like, you did nothing. You just put on an RPA. You just said we could do RPA as well. But it's a lot of similar concept, but it's just very, it's different. So I do think you're going to see automation professionals go back and forth to doing business process automation versus test automation. Okay, how am I doing on time, Tariq? Okay, so be able to talk some questions here. So recap this. Research historical perspectives. I mean, so that was more things that was my experience on the historical perspective of what I've seen. Maybe people have different views of how they've seen the automation market. Absolutely, but I really use the historical aspect, especially when I'm talking about recordings, because that's where I think we can get to, that we can record our tests easier and get to our state quicker. because this is where the industry started. It went away from that because it wasn't working, and it's continually trying to get back there. Understand what's changing in software delivery that leads to evolution. So we know, you know, these cycles, I don't even have to talk about them, the waterfall, the agile, the DevOps, everything faster. But that doesn't mean that necessarily that's your project team's delivery cycle. Absorb the 5 key benefits surrounding, build a plan around appropriate items. You know what, of those 5 things I talked about, maybe they all don't work for you. Maybe say, yeah, but if there's one thing that resonates, maybe that's something that's worth looking at from a recording. Stay current with predictions from leading experts. Look for common themes. So I showed you that from Gaurav and some from Joe, because these were like different ends of what people were looking at. I'm like, but there's some common themes here. Build a plan about using recordings in sprints, measure it accordingly, see how it goes. All right. Questions, thoughts? Think I'm crazy. That's okay. Tariq, should I see if there's anything online? Yes, sir.
Are there any like
I can tell we are, and I work for a company called PwC. Yeah, so it's a pretty large accounting firm. Yes, this is what we've gone in with. Yeah.
So that way the tests are kind of.
It could be. It just, the whole process, my whole thing about this, the whole process for creating tests was slow. Just creating tests was slow. So I had an automation engineer work for me one time, and it took him 3 weeks to create a test that went through 3 screens and did a data-driven test. I'm like, I could have done that in a tool in like an hour, maybe 2. Put in some data-driven variables. He hand-coded it all, probably wrote 1,000 lines of code. It's just too slow. And if I know that these manual tests, how many people are working with regression tests that are over 1,000? These legacy tests on these legacy systems, I got 1,000, 2,000 tests. How can that be? You're not going to ask a manual tester to go in there and say, can you make sure all of these tests are, or at least the P1 tests are editable and they're all ready for automation? You're not going to ask them that. No one is. And no product owner is going to say, oh, I see the value add of a manual tester going in there and updating 2,000 tests. That's my whole point of why I'm doing this. That's the whole point of why I'm like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be something better to get off the ground started. Any other questions? So yeah, we can certainly talk more about that. Love to.
Any gotchas you run into?
Every step there's a gotcha. I mean, I would say if they're recording a test from a UI perspective, has anyone ever done any UI recording from an automation perspective? When it's digging in, there's 2 ways to identify objects. There's the accessibility, in general, with any tool. There's the accessibility layer, which is the MSAA layer or UI automation library that Microsoft provides. Or there's OCR, right? Some kind of like visual techniques. But if it's going the route of the accessibility layer, if you click it, it's digging in. When you're recording, it goes slow because it's digging into all the attributes and the recording around those red object, those little red frames that puts around an object, it goes slow. You can outclick your automation. You can move faster. You can click, and your automation's not able to keep up. If you click at the right speed, you can have quality automation. That was one of the gotchas. You can't click at it. You can't go through your normal web app like if you're recording, you got to go at a little slower speed. You have to. Yes, sir.
How do you balance the feedback from the business you're going to ask them?
Hand holding. We will hand hold right with them. And so I will put that right with them when they're starting. I will say, forget that little record option is there. Here's your application under test now. Just go. I click that, and I said, wait for that red object to appear and just click through. So they've created, I'm like, oh no, every time when I do this, we got to put in tax information first. We got to do this, we got to do that. And so they'll walk through that. But initially it's at the start. I can't put a tool in front of them right off the bat. It's usually. My sell to them is to say, if you can record this for me one time and really sit with me for one flow, I can reuse that for all these subsequent releases, and I don't have to bug you anymore. I said, I can reuse this for all the subsequent releases if you can put in a quality recording for me now. Can you do that? Yeah. Let's do it. I will make the time. So you're telling me you're going to record this information once, and you will have it, and this will be something that you'll able to build as part of your pipeline and part of your suite. Yes. I haven't had the business say no to me on that. But I tell them the one time, I said, but you got it, but you have, it's a double-edged sword, because I tell them you've got to invest the time to give me a quality recording. If you just kind of half-ass through it, I'm going to be coming knocking at your door probably in another week, 2 weeks. But if it's not, and you're saying this is all I need, I'm good. It's not as hard of a sell as you'd think. It seems like it. It truly does. Asking the business for any kind of testing is tough. Yes, sir. For which one? A lot of them. There's probably, I would say, at least 15 tools in the market that do this. The different tools. I'll talk to you offline. I don't want to promote any kind of product, but I'll tell you what we use. Huh? Where's Phil? Did he leave? All right. Hey, Tariq, close your ears. All right. They do. Yeah, we are looking at that and looking much more to use some of the RPA tools that we have. We have a primary one in our environment that we're looking for. How does that blend over to automation, test automation? Yeah, no, it's absolutely right. It's kind of like, there was a tool that used to be an automation tool called Automation Anywhere. And so they used to be test automation. And then they just rebranded and said, this whole test automation market has gotten so saturated. We're RPA. What did you do different to your product? Nothing. We're RPA. Okay. And it works for them because it's that kind of recording and that kind of thing is still the same. Yes, sir.
I'm curious, because I hear
On everything? Yeah. Right. So you want to role play for a minute? You want to be the business analyst? And what's your name? Hey, Robin. Hey, Robin, listen, if you can help us out, if you can, I'm going to give you a tool that you can record. I'm going to be hand to hand with you. If you can record these tests for us, I'll know that I can incorporate that as part of my regression test and as part of my automation each and every time. But I just need to understand the flow one time. And instead of asking you to document this, put it on some kind of Visio diagram and flow, would you mind if I just put the tool in front of you to record it? That's all the documentation I need. Yes. Yeah. Right. That's, and for the most part. But you know what? You're already halfway there. So you're true. You may not have all the functional things like these are, I want to look at where my defect kind of density reports are against a given module, but I'm already halfway there. If you're telling me this is the flow and you're telling me these are the important the modules to test, then I could check that. Yeah. True. Right. And I think getting them to a point, if they record the flow and seeing that, I think there's another step that you need to add in for functional kind of advisory for the test. There's true, but at least we have the flow to start. Now I can go back to a product owner and say, how this is a critical area. So based on this flow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In 3, there's some key things I got to validate. 1 and 2 are just kind of setup things for 3. 3 is all my things I need. And maybe I have that conversation to go talk to them about 3. I'm more compartmentalizing and kind of modularizing what they want to talk about.
What do you think the learning curve is
for them? See, that's the thing. I know I'm minimizing this. I think the learning curve is low because I'm initially hand-holding. I'm like, I don't need you to learn all the bells and whistles of the tool. Hit this record button, walk through your application, give me the recording. That's all I'm asking for. Like, you don't have to know anything else. There's all kinds of doodads of what you can do in tools. Like here's this, I can break these scripts on this, I can put breakpoints and all this. Just record a test for me. And then I'll go from there. What's that? Completely. Because if I miss something in the flow.
This is more of a meta question. So it seems like it's going full circle. It's kind of what your thesis is, that they want to record replay and kind of throw it in. And now you
Right. Right.
That's kind of the key.
Yeah, and I think so, because I was around when the recording tools, like back in the Mercury days, I'm sure if anyone's used those, it was all the record, nothing worked. Nothing worked. And even while I was a big rational guy, nothing worked. Like for playing it was like, if I got it to work in all green, I'd call my boss over. I'd call anyone. Look, it ran successful one time. And this was a desktop app, not even a dynamic application. But it was like, you see, oh yeah, it works for but even you'll see here, how many, just go look at the tooling market. Everyone's saying codeless automation will work. Don't have to have programming knowledge. It's all advocated for that. Yeah, no, there is still a learning curve, but what we try to do with the recordings is just not have them understand. I don't want them to understand the doodads of the tool and all the bells and whistles. I want them just to record their flow. Now you've given me a good code base to start. Now you've given me, it's given me a better place to start from and go forward.
All right, let's give Jim again.
Thank you.